So Melissa, great to see you. Great to see this at last. We've talked about this quite a few times.
We have talked about it several times, and it's great that you've made the journey down.
So what actually is this?
Okay, this is a Heliomotion system. It's the biggest one we do. It's a PV6 with 72 cell panels, and Louise and Richard, who put it in, were the first people in the country to actually realise it was a great thing and go for it.
So what sort of power would this actually do at peak?
Right, well that's a very interesting question. It depends on obviously where the sun is, leaves and everything else, but we would expect it to generate between 2,400 and 5,000 kilowatt hours a year.
Okay, so that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So something like that. So one of the tricks of this is it actually follows the sun, doesn't it?
It does indeed. So during the day, you can see at the moment the sun is at the east because we're sort of reasonably early in the day. At the end of the day, the panels will end up facing due west, which is over there. So it follows it by moving about every 6 to 7 minutes, virtually imperceptible to the eye.
And how's that actually powered? Is that powered off?
It's got a slew drive in the back.
Okay, so it just turns it.
Yeah, and it's the GPS is what actually defines where it's positioned.
Okay.
And it's very clever because overnight it knows to return to the starting position. So after sunset, it'll rotate backwards, ready to be in the right place for the morning.
So does that actually use a lot of power to actually turn it?
No, because obviously it's during the day it's powered by light. So.
Yeah. And obviously today is quite a bright day.
It's a lovely day today, first one for some time.
So you're obviously going to be getting a reasonable amount of power today. What, if it was sort of an overcast, dreary, typical English autumn day, for example?
Obviously it's a substantial amount less than it is on a good day. You're probably going to get 20% on a bad day in comparison with 100% you'll get on a good day.
Okay. And one of the things, obviously, it means you're not putting solar panels on your roof.
Yes.
Does that have advantages from planning side of things?
If you are not in a conservation area and you haven't got a listed building, you can bung one system in without permission. If you want to put more than one system in, you have to have permission. If you're in a conservation area or an AONB, then you have to talk to the planners.
Because I know several people have had refused putting solar on the roof. I just wonder if this might be an option for them.
I think it's a really good option, because if you've got it in your garden and you're not overlooked, then the planners are going to take a lot less of a negative view. You're not spoiling the look of a listed building. You know, it might be Georgian building. Well, you know, I can understand why they don't want panels on a Georgian building. And if nobody can see it from the road or whatever, it's a much easier discussion to have.
Excellent. So in terms of installing one of these, is it a concrete pillar?
Yes. I don't know whether you can see the plinth underneath, but it's got a metre by metre plinth in which a foundation plate is sort of floated on the top. You can see the bolts just protruding through the foundation plate. So then the column bolts to the foundation plate, and then the tracking unit is on a separate piece of column, and that bolts on to the next bit, all by very, very serious steel bolts.
Excellent. So it's not going to blow over in our wonderful storms we've had
As you can see, having had Storm Ciara and Storm Dennis, there is no damage to it whatsoever. There is an option with a longer rod that if you're worried that the wind's going to be over 80 miles an hour, you can turn it horizontal to present the least possible resistance to the wind. And I think Louise and Richard did attach the rod for Storm Ciara, but they didn't for Storm Dennis, because the winds were 50 miles an hour as opposed to 80, although the rain was more severe.
Indeed. Well, it's good you're thinking about those sort of things.
Oh, the guys who've invented this have tested it in an island in the Baltic where the weather conditions are far more severe than here. Although you might argue that the weather conditions everywhere are catching up, but it is tested to an extremely rigorous level.
That's excellent. So this is obviously the biggest one.
Yes.
What other sizes do you do?
2-panel, 3-panel, 4-panel and 6-panel.
And obviously all scaling down in terms of the peak power.
Yes. I mean, in Scandinavia, where a lot of people have holiday cabins, the 3-panel is really, really popular because of the fact it's quite narrow, because they're all on, they're stacked one on top of each other, and they're landscape rather than portrait, and that seems to be enough to generate enough power for people using a holiday cabin, you know, at weekends or whatever.
And I haven't seen some of those holiday cabins. You wouldn't want to put solar panels on the roof.
No, they're not strong enough.
Well, that's strong enough indeed. So this is a really excellent idea. So we've seen you also have an app for this as well.
Correct.
So you can monitor.
Yes. So you can log in via the inverter, and that gives you real-time measurements of what exactly it's producing on a daily basis, monthly, weekly, yearly. so you can see exactly what's going on.
So does this come as a package with the inverter and everything else?
You can buy it in two different ways. You can buy it as a sort of cut-down kit without the inverter and without the panels, or you can buy it as a total package. Sometimes, if you're getting it installed by a local company, they'll want to actually sell you the panels and the inverter themselves, because they'll have them in stock, and in fact it's cheaper than us shipping them in from Finland.
Yeah.
So we're relaxed about that. If the installers want to sell the panels, that's absolutely fine.
So you could use different panels as well? So
You can choose whatever panels you like. There are two different frame sizes for the PV6, so you can choose either standard 60-cell panels or 72-cell panels.
and I guess that future-proofs it as well. 'Cause
It does.
You've got obviously lots of new types of panels coming on.
And they're constantly actually monitoring the panels and actually adapting the frames appropriately.
Excellent. It's a really good idea. I like it a lot.
I think it's genius. That's why I got involved. I mean, I can't understand why, in fact, the take-up has been, the awareness has been quite low. We actually won the Build It Best Home Technology Award in 2018, just as it was introduced into the country. So they spotted its potential straight away. But I think last year, with the cessation of the FIT and the slow announcement of the replacement, the smart energy generator, I think a lot of sort of domestic consumers were completely worried about the return on investment and actually put their hands back in their pockets rather than releasing cash to pay.
So let's just explain that a little bit, because FIT was the feed-in tariff, which
Yes.
was a subsidy effectively for having a
Yes.
solar generation, and the smart energy generator, that's a tariff effectively for paying you?
So the FIT was an amount of money that the government gave people as a sort of token gesture against their output. They've now transferred the responsibility to the energy companies. So the energy companies now want to monitor what people are exporting back to the grid, and will pay you a modest sum for what you export back. So you can imagine the energy companies aren't particularly keen on that, because it slightly nibbles away from their profit margins. But I think it's outrageous, the fact that we can generate free electricity and give it to them, which they sell then to other people at 13p to 16p a unit.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's gross profiteering by the electricity companies. So far, 5 or 6 have actually announced their SEG rates, and Octopus are at the moment the top of the range with 5.6p.
Yeah, I noticed Octopus were doing a far better deal than most of the others.
Yeah.
And as we know, most people who are in my EV group and your EV group are because you drive an MGS.
Yes, I do indeed.
Are Octopus users, because the Octopus Go tariff is so attractive.
Absolutely. I really do not understand why the government said you have to pay more than 0p. Why was that? That means they could offer 0.1 of a p.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It makes no sense at all.
I guess competition will get in there. I mean, people are going to...
Eventually, when they want to attract switchers,
Yeah.
they'll actually have to put their rates up.
Yeah.
Especially as the EV market expands.
It'd be interesting to see if Octopus go the agile route with the pay in tariff as well.
Yes, yeah.
It'd be very intriguing to see that.
There are so many options and so many tariffs. It's actually really difficult to keep an eye on all of them. But Octopus at the moment do seem to be winning. But of course that means their customer base is expanding rapidly, which means they've got an infrastructure problem trying to keep up with demand for smart meters and stuff like that.
Yeah, indeed. So what broad pricing are we looking at for something like this?
You're talking about between £2,000 and £5,000, depending on whether you buy it with the panels, without the panels, with the inverter, without the inverter, and the size you're looking at.
And that's for the unit.
Yes.
Obviously installation on top of that.
Well, if you're quite keen on DIY, you can do the bulk of the installation yourself, and it was actually designed as a DIY product initially. So if you can dig a hole, if you can mix some concrete, then that takes that out of the equation. That'll save you £500 or £600. Putting the kit together itself takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's like grown-up Meccano, Allen keys, etc. Yeah. And I've seen it done, and it's really not a major problem. And in fact, if you look at the website, you'll see there's a video of assembly clearly laid out. So if you're, as I say, vaguely competent, all you need to do is put it together, assemble it, put the hole in, fill it with concrete, and then get your electrician who's experienced in solar to come and wire it in and commission it.
Brilliant.
And it's all done by plugging in a computer with a USB. So in here you've got the tracking unit, which actually turns. As you can see, it's circular, so it actually is the part that actually turns the system. Here you've got the control board, and here you've got the isolator unit. And this is the rod here that controls the angle of the panels, and as you can see at the moment, they're at a fairly steep angle. In the summer, the angle will change to be a more shallow angle to actually be more precisely in angle with the sun.
One thing obviously with this is you can take it with you.
Absolutely. In comparison with roof, which is a major problem, you've got to have lifting equipment and scaffolding to install it and deinstall it. This, you can simply undo the bolts and you can deassemble it, and then if you move house you can take it with you and reassemble it.
Which gets around one of those return on investment questions. I mean, I often hear people say, well, I won't put it on now because I'm moving in 3 or 4 years' time.
Exactly, especially for people in their 30s and 40s who may well be in the job market with, you know, moving to another place. It's actually a really good USP.
And how does it actually compare to putting it on the roof in terms of
output?
Yeah.
In terms of output, we're looking at between a 30 and 70% increase per panel. So in other words, you've got 6 panels here, that equals about 10 panels on the roof in an average UK location, which we expect to give about 45% extra power.
Okay, so that definitely is going to affect how quickly you can pay it back.
Oh, definitely, yes. Yeah, it really shortens the ROI.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, Melissa.
Great pleasure.